Welcome back to Beholders Know on a D&D podcast. Today I'm here with Tony or TT or T Tiger 077.
Yep.
Welcome. I am all over the place today already. This is going to be interesting.
Hey, that's okay. We all have those days.
So welcome. Thanks for joining me in our first February episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Been really enjoying listening to your show.
Yay. And we're going to be listening or talking about character building and world building today.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, listeners, if this episode is more organized than normal, this is 100% Tony. I have not done any of this, so thank him for that. Not me.
Well, I like to keep a little bit organized, but sometimes, as we all know, with Dungeons and Dragons and dungeon mastering, all of our plans can get thrown to the wayside within a matter of minutes. So
I have a OneNote that I am desperately trying to keep organized for my Monday recordings, my Monday games that are not recorded, just Monday games. Desperately trying to keep that organized. I'm pretty sure I already lost it. Like, I have just random people in there that's like, this person, potential love interest, but I don't have them put in a city anywhere. Like, I'm going to go back to that in 6 months and be like, what?
yeah.
Potential love interest of who? What was I thinking?
You're sifting through your notes of like trying to piece together like a lost episode.
Pretty much. It's like, what is happening? That's fine. So first and foremost, tell us a little bit about your experiences with tabletop games overall.
Yeah, so my beginning experiences with tabletop RPGs, I've always known that they were out there. I've always known of Dungeons and Dragons. My first kind of intro into Dungeons and Dragons was, I believe I was in middle school at this point, and some friends and I were over for like a birthday party, and one of my friends said, "Hey, do you want to try out some Dungeons and Dragons? Like, I have some characters and we can all do some rolling and start this adventure and stuff." And we were like, "Okay, well, let's see what this is all about." And so we started, and maybe like 30 minutes in, I was super confused on my gnome rogue character, and I didn't know exactly what was going on, and then everybody else was very confused, and so then we
Sounds
just
about
all
right.
yeah, we all like decided, okay, I don't know what we're doing. Let's go play some Super Smash Brothers. So
Also
that
sounds about right.
yeah, so that was kind of my introduction into Dungeons and Dragons, and I never really got back into it until I had a very good friend recommend Critical Role to me, and that was about 4.5, 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And so I started watching from the very beginning because he said, "Hey, you need to start from the very beginning. Don't like try to catch the end of this current arc." And so I started from the very beginning, and I pretty much was hooked from there. And I watched it like some mad person. Like, every waking moment I would want to be watching Critical Role. So I fell in love with all the characters that Matt Mercer and Laura Bailey and Travis and Marisha and Taliesin, and Sam and Ashley were all creating, and it just holds a special place in my heart for making me want to come back to this very interesting collaborative storytelling device. And a couple years later, the same friend suggested that we all come together and do a continual campaign. So we got together kind of like a session zero type. He told us that we were going to be in Ravenloft, and we should just be playing. So we're going through Curse of Strahd.
Mhm.
We'll just be playing some characters that you want to be playing. And so I thought that I really, really was drawn to the Dragonborn race. And when I was reading through the books, it's like, oh man, the monk sounds awesome. I really want to punch a dragon in the face. And wouldn't it be funny if I was a dragonborn and punched a dragon in the face? Was kind of my thought process there.
I will say that monks are awesome.
Yes, they are really, and it's really fun to hear you talk about your monk. and then have Marisha from Critical Role play a monk on that show too. It's just, it makes sense in all of the ways that they're being played within those worlds. I know a lot of the time the monk class gets bashed on as that's not really like a high fantasy class. But there's back in high fantasy, there's a lot of people that would strictly fight with just like fists and kicks and punches and stuff. So it makes sense to me in that regard.
Yeah, I just like so for her, how do I word this? That's the one game that I don't take notes in. It's the one game that I'm not 100% always aware of what's going on. And that's because it's really nice to have that one game that I can just kind of turn off the brain, because Tari doesn't have a lot of thinking that she does. She's a super sweet person and will save whoever she can, but she doesn't put a lot of thought ahead of time, which is funny because, like, I don't normally play that type of character. Like, I will play Murder Hobo sometimes just for fun, but I love playing characters that involve thinking, that are slightly more complex. And that's always the freaking note taker, because nobody else at the table is going to take notes.
Yeah, no kidding.
So it's kind of nice on that game. It's like, I literally did say in our last Friday session, I'm like, I'm going to be honest, I do not know what we're doing. I'm like, is this the bad guy, the big bad end boss? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, cool. So are we killing him? That's the goal. Okay, cool.
Just let me know.
I do some cool monk shit.
Yep, exactly. Can I punch some shit? That's all I really need to know.
Do you know Eberron?
I know a little bit of Eberron. I've read some of the books, but I wouldn't say that I have extensive knowledge of it.
So we were fighting Merrick Stakhanith. Who was the final boss of this module. And it was kind of like, we found the Creation Forge, which is the thing that creates Warforge.
Yeah.
Our goal was to literally destroy/turn off the Creation Forge. I had thought we were just turning it off, but evidently we were destroying it. And then we fought Merrick's, who had previously attacked us. So we were like, well, we have to attack him back now, even though he's this big bad end boss. The first round, there is this, I'm calculating while the Warforged is going. He pulls out a wand of fireball, shoots a 9th level fireball at Merrick's.
Oh my gosh.
And then I calculate, and I go, how tall is the Creation Forge? And the DM's like 70 feet. And how high is Merrick's right now? And she's like, he moved back, so he's 120 feet. Okay. So I'm going to run up the side of the Creation Forge. I have 50-foot movement, Step of the Wind, so now I have 100-foot movement. And then because of Step of the Wind, my leaps are tripled, and because of my boots are doubled, and because of my boots, my leaps are tripled. So I can jump 66 feet. So I run up 70 feet and leap and punch Merrick's in the face. And she's like, dope. What? Roll me an acrobatics check, I guess. And I'm like, okay, 25.
Nice. Well, at certain levels in Monk, you're just, you can just run up walls.
Yep. Like, I'm a 10th level right now, so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I can do that. And she's just like, this is ridiculous. Evidently, with those 2 attacks, granted it was a 9th level fireball, and then the wand was destroyed. Those 2 attacks, we got him down to 14 hit points.
Oh, so you just knocked the rest of his teeth out.
And then he vanished and teleported away.
No.
And I'm like, oh.
Mulligan.
It's like, but I was going to push him off of the edge.
Yeah.
And then I fell 120 feet and took no damage.
Oh, jeez.
Because slow fall.
Yep. Because of the slow fall, and you're at 10th level now, so I mean.
Yeah. I rolled a 12, it was 12d6 damage. I rolled on a dice roller just to see if it was possible, like how many times did I have to roll to hit 50? Because that's how much I had. It took 10 times before I hit 51.
Oh, man.
So I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
We're good.
Those are always cool, some cool stuff that you can do.
Yeah, I was just a little sad because I didn't have any more things I could do. If I would have had a bonus action, I would have killed him. But I used my bonus action to get to him. I was like, dang it.
So with Terry, did you have an inspiration when you were creating the character?
Probably my kid, honestly, a little
Oh,
bit.
really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
So Tari is a rebellious 19-year-old who wants to protect everybody and doesn't really give a shit about herself when she's doing that. That's very much to the T, my child.
Okay.
But also it's a little bit of like letting go of that fear that I have of what if I say something. Because like in real life, if I see something, I don't necessarily say something because I'm afraid of the consequences. When it's online, I'm more brave, I guess is the right term. And I'll stand up for it. But in real life, oh God, no. I would just back up slowly and call somebody else who I think would be better suited to deal with it. So it's kind of like, what would it be like to not have that?
Yeah.
That anxiety block. And Tari is purely that. She's like, someone's being a bitch, and she's straight up gonna tell you you're being a bitch.
So Tari was almost like you were trying to explore a different aspect of your personality or a hope that you would have.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's actually what I really enjoy when I'm doing character building and trying to play a character is putting a little bit of a piece of myself or some goal that I have for myself into the character that I'm creating or playing. Because what's really great about all TTRPGs and not just Dungeons and Dragons is that when you're doing the role playing portion of it, you're able to explore a lot more about yourself and find out like more about yourself and other people around you while you're playing the game. And I think that that's totally awesome.
Yeah, sometimes I just like to play characters just for fun. And that's 90% of the time. I'm just playing a character. The character is just that. Though I've mentioned this before, but I've played characters sometimes to help me get over certain things. So like learning how to talk to people, how to become a better speaker. I forcefully started playing bards or face characters or whoever, just charismatic characters that were forced in social situations that Nikki would be terrible at and would not be good at. And honestly, like 2 years ago, plus me, if you would have said, hey, you're going to run a podcast, I'd be like, who the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
Purposefully being social? Okay, that's not happening.
Yeah, now look at you.
No, I talk way too much.
No, and you're doing an awesome job. I do have to say. Such a great job in the community and bringing people together and doing all of these community-oriented charity events and stuff. That's absolutely great.
I need to do more of those. That was fun.
Yeah.
You heard it here first, guys. We are doing more of those. I just need time to plan them. More than 3 weeks.
Yeah. I'm sure that you could probably plan one per quarter, and that would be totally awesome.
Yeah, I think that would be my limit.
Yeah.
Would be it per quarter. Like, just because of the amount of, at least to the level that I did for the 31st. If it was just like, hey, we're doing a stream for like 4 hours, then it'd be one thing. But a 12-hour stream type of thing would be like once a quarter. And it would be definitely, hey, we need more people planning this with me.
Yeah, that was one thing that I was like, "Oh man, a 12-hour stream. How does that really look like? Like how many people do you have to have involved in order to really do that?" Oof.
In total, we had 18 people involved, 17 people involved.
Ooh. Okay.
I think it might have been 18. I think we had 16 guests and then one person who was purely just a moderator. And then my husband, who was supposed to just be a moderator, but then was a guest as well, last minute.
Nice.
But it was like for me plus 3 players and a DM, or me plus 4 players.
Yeah.
And then at least one moderator each time, because I didn't anticipate that many. I think if it got bigger, it would need more moderators. But I think next time I would have 2 hosts at least, so we could tag team and be like, tag, you're a hit.
Yeah, exactly. It's so much of a stress on one person to continually do that for 12 hours, doing the game master thing.
It didn't help that I had to go to work the next day either.
Oh gosh.
I was originally supposed to have it off, and that's why I had planned it for that day, because the 30th was our actual anniversary So I was like, oh, cool, I can do it Wednesday. But then I was like, well, if we do it Thursday, people might already be off of work or might be not wanting to not have New Year's Eve plans because pandemic. So then they'll have to stay inside. So we might as well celebrate.
Yeah.
And then I had the first off because that's a holiday. And then I found out like 2 weeks prior, after I had scheduled everything, got everybody situated, got everything announced. Oh, hey, by the way, I need you here on the 1st. Or I need you to come in on the 31st, which was the day we were recording. And I'm like, I can't be here on the 31st. I straight up told you.
Yeah. I made plans.
Yeah, I was like, I literally told you I have a 12-hour charity stream on the 31st. I'm going to be very tired on the 1st. Can we not work on the 1st? Is there any way to make it work on a different day, like the 2nd or the 3rd? And the options were the 1st or the 31st. I'm like, did you even listen?
Well, that would definitely be a rough day after an exhausting 12-hour stream.
Oh yeah, for sure. It took like 3 days to recover from that.
Oh, man.
So, when you're making characters now, do you make characters? So you have a show called Make It Playable.
Yeah.
And you just randomly create characters with that.
Yeah. So on our Twitch stream every Monday night, I get on and just do a random generation of a level and then a race and a background and then a starting class. And then there's some mathematics in there that will generate 1 or 2 multi-class options.
Mm-hmm.
And the random generation portion of the stream really allows me to focus on more of the storytelling aspect of it, because really I'm not expecting any particular results.
Mm-hmm.
So, like one night, I could roll up a Loxodon rogue cleric that started out as a fisherman. That was one that I had to like flesh out, and I was like, oh, I have no idea where I'm going to start with this, but it ended up being a pretty cool story. And so that's kind of like it's stretching my creativity into creating a shorter backstory. I try to keep it fairly short because I don't want to go too late on the streams, but it's really an opportunity for me to do some sort of creative writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I might as well involve Dungeons and Dragons and character building and do it live so that other people can be inspired to create kind of like wackier things and say, yeah, if I want to make a goblin cleric that was like a mercenary, like sure, you could create that. You just got to spin the story, a little bit more.
Yeah, I always hated when somebody said you can't do that.
Right.
It's like, what do you mean I can't?
Yeah.
There was actually a game that we played where someone wanted to be a shifter in,
Mm-hmm.
I forget what the reason behind it was, but she just liked the feel of shifter and she wanted to be a particular type of cleric, I think. And one of the players was like, oh, you can't do that.
Why not?
Because of blah, 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 blah. And it was like this explanation. And like, sure, that might make sense in the lore or in theory, but why not?
Right.
Why not? Why can't she be that one that's different?
Yeah. I mean, you're a group of adventurers. You are all in here because you're in part of this story, this party, because you are special. So why not extrapolate on how special that one character is?
Exactly. Like some of my favorite characters are flawed. Like they just shouldn't exist. My half-orc knowledge cleric, for example, was one. I've mentioned her before on the show, but she was raised by a Gith of some sort. I think it was Githyanki, and he was a priest of a goddess of knowledge.
Yeah.
So she was raised to believe in the goddess of knowledge, and even though half-orcs aren't supposed to be super intelligent according to the racial stats, I gave her an average intelligence, and she still worshipped and believed in that god and did her best. She just wasn't necessarily the sharpest person ever when it came to rolling some of those checks when she needed to. Roll a religion check. I might have fell asleep during that class.
Right. But at least there's a basis of the story. So, I mean, those are giving flaws to your characters are always something to feel like you need to do. I've told my players and my campaign that if you don't have flaws in your character, then there's something wrong. You need to have something that you actively need to be looking out to do wrong with your character, because it makes for a good story element. I mean, all of us as human beings, we all have flaws. And if we're playing these characters to what they are supposed to be as, like, a little bit more realistic, then those flaws and bonds and personality traits and all that kind of stuff, they all need to be there so we can effectively play to their characters.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be I steal everything I see or something super obstructive. It could be something
Right.
simple that comes into play every once in a while.
Right.
Like Tari is that person where she'll just go around and punch something without thinking. But like I've played other characters who their flaw was just their naivety. So they would
Mhm.
trust people without thinking about it. Or it could just be that they like to fidget with things. So they absent-mindedly grab things without even like wanting to be a bad person or steal.
Yep.
But they're just like, ooh, and they pick it up and they're looking at it and they just start fidgeting with it, not realizing that they're about to steal it.
Yeah.
Which could get them in trouble later.
Yeah, and that's like that's funny that you bring that up, because I'm going back and reading Patrick Rothfuss, the Name of the Wind series, the second book, and Kavoth he fidgets quite a bit, not as much as some of the other characters in there, but there was a point in the story about the middle of the book where he's trying to learn how to track some people in the forest. And what he ends up doing, just out of, as something to do with his hands, he ends up tearing leaves off of branches of trees or bushes, and then he like shreds them up and then leaves them on the ground. And then one of the trackers was like, no, you can't do that. Like, you're gonna leave a trail for somebody to follow. They're obviously gonna know that you're here. So even like that fidgeting flaw is something that a game master or a DM could use if you're still playing it that way, as a way to improve yourself. And that's really what all flaws are going to be. They're going to be ways to improve the character over time.
Yeah, for sure. That's what always makes it really interesting for me, is when a character has that flaw, but either grows or there's like the DM remembers what they are and like absent-mindedly adds them into the story without you even realizing it.
Yeah. Yeah, those are the greatest DM moments, is when you kind of forget about your own behaviors, but the dungeon master always has them in mind, and then just kind of like trickles in all of these little things that your character should know or should be doing. And then several sessions later, you come to a realization, oh man, that's what they were doing. Ah, now that makes sense.
So I might have said this story before, but this one was really funny to me. I forgot one of my characters had a brother because it hadn't come up in a really, really long time. And I remember she had a family. She had parents. I remembered the parents, but I couldn't remember specifically if I said that she had a sibling. Evidently, I did. And we were in town, and in that same session, I go, yeah, I don't have any siblings. I'm an only child. And then later in that same session, we run into someone who goes, how's your brother? And I'm like, pause, out of character. Do I have a brother? And she's like, you said you did in like 6 weeks ago or 6 months ago. I'm like, did I? But the problem was, like, we used to use a different app, so my backstory was all in that app. And then I switched to D&D Beyond, but never was able to transfer my backstory. So I could not remember any. I'm like, what was their name?
Yep. Your character had just a moment where I wish I was an only child. If only I was an only child.
Well, because of how she is, I was just like, let's pretend she just said, yes, I have a sibling.
Yeah.
Because Nikki forgot. Tari did not, promise.
Yeah.
I caught a couple of episodes of Make It Playable, and I actually really liked that concept of just like, here's randomness, make it work.
Yeah.
See if you can make it work. And so it kind of empowers that you don't have to necessarily take the thing that's going to make you the best at something. You can take something that's just for fun.
Yeah.
Or just fits your story or makes the rest of your story make sense sometimes.
Yeah.
But I like that approach because, like, I have built characters that are very much like, oh, this is going to give me a stronger dex. Let me go with that.
Right. Yeah. There's two reasons why I really like character building. One of them is because I really like numbers and I like the math that goes into it. But the other part is really kind of the creativity of how to bring a story to life and how to bring a character to life. And so I get caught up a lot into the min-maxing character buildings and trying to do everything optimally. And there was a point probably like 6 months before we started doing the podcast where I was like, why do I spend all my time like trying to make these optimum characters in my free time when like that's all it really is? It's just a bunch of numbers when it comes down to the character.
Mhm.
Like I don't want people to look at my characters and say, yeah, that's just binary. I'm just reading a bunch of ones and zeros.
Like, oh, you made another half-elf rogue,
Yeah.
another gnome wizard.
Yeah, exactly. And so I came to the realization that, you know what? All of the characters that I need to be focusing and building really need to be more story driven with those flavors of mechanics thrown in. And that's kind of how I came to really kind of focus on the character building aspects of Make It Playable. And then thinking about, what if you had that half orc knowledge cleric that wasn't super knowledgeable in certain aspects but had that training? Is that playable? And that's kind of like, how does it become playable is then the next question. And so I kept like asking myself questions and thinking, why do this or why do that? Or, how does this become a important part to this character? And I think the greatest part of creating characters is asking all of those questions.
Mhm.
If we were to continue asking ourselves questions about the character we are creating, we're going to come to good conclusions. So that's really why I enjoy the character building process, is because I get to ask a lot of questions of myself and make sense of the story and the numbers. And it's kind of combining all of these good tools that Wizards of the Coast has created, but in some sense, you got to make sense of it all.
And then with backstory, I know with your my playable ones, you come up with somewhat of a backstory.
Mhm.
But how important to you is backstory?
So when I start doing backstories for a lot of my characters, I generally start with like a 2 paragraph concept of, where did this character come from? What did their family situation look like? And then what led them to becoming an adventurer? And then those are kind of the 3 main points that I kind of hit before I start delving in deeper. And so the backstory is really where is kind of like the meat of this character. And so, I mean, to answer your question in a simple manner, it would be it's super important to have a backstory.
I like to figure out some of the backstory, but I love leaving things open-ended so that those can be thrown at me by the DM later in the game.
Yeah.
So, perfect example is Behold Clearlight. I gave the DM it was detailed enough where it was like, here's the number of years so it makes sense type of deal. And this is what the result was. But I don't know why any of these things happened.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to get her mother pregnant the second time after fighting to get pregnant for 5, 6, 7 years? What happened to what deal or spell or weird voodoo thing did Rissa's dad or mother do to cause that child? And is that why he is now missing at 18? Or is it something unrelated?
Yeah.
Why was her mother stricken ill once the second child was born. Like, all those things are open-ended, and it could be very well a mundane thing. It just so happened that she got sick after he was born, and just so happened that he decided at 18, fuck this, I'm leaving. But it's also open-ended enough where it's up to you what he's tried and which people he's pissed off, he being Rissa's dad. And the only thing I said was that she's very close with her mother, like super overprotective of her, and has this constant kind of war going on with her dad because she's expected to be something that she isn't. And she went full out a different way once he decided that her brother was more important to pick up the family line of business. So she has all this training to be a business person or a businesswoman, and she could do it and do it very well because she's pretty charismatic. But instead she used that to go intimidate people and to get on the wrong side of people and just piss off the people who were making her dad money, just to kind of prod a little bit and antagonize. And now she's like 30, fully tattooed, and her brother, who was supposed to take over the business, is missing. So they're like, well, you have to take over the business. She's like, fuck that.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of the open-ended questions should be communicated with your GM as well. I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, and so you have the experience of being a player and a GM, and so you know as well as I that the good stories that we're going to be creating for our TTRPGs are going to be created by both players and the game master.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not going to leave in those open-ended questions and write a full novel about your character's backstory before they even start at level 1, then how's the GM going to like work in with the story there, because you've already told the story of your character. There's no room for growth.
Yeah, and I also like having like little tidbits that come in later. Like, I'm going to be in a show in this near future. I don't want to give too much away, but it's the Inn at the Edge of Greenwood by The First Watch.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's such a fun show if you haven't listened to it.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
So anybody who's listening, please go check them out, because basically it's a character from any world that's visiting this inn for one reason or another. And they're just passing through, and then they just share a tale from their trip or from their journey. And it's such a wholesome type of story because there's no combat, there's no fear, there's no threat. It's just, sure, let me take a rest at this inn and tell you a tale.
Yeah.
In exchange for a drink.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have Rissa on there in the future, and I was talking to the DM like, what kind of shenanigans could I have gotten into just to make sure it flowed with the story? But ultimately I'm creating it, and Ryan just gave me a couple of ideas. He's like, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. Here's a couple of things. I'm like, okay, but tell me this. And he gave me the answer. I'm like, okay, perfect. I have an idea. It's forming up there in that noggin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the beauty of creating characters with other people, is it's collaborative storytelling. In order to collaboratively storytell, you need to work with other people. So if you're working with your other players, they're going to be in the campaign or the session, and the GM, you're able to ping pong off of each other and come up with something absolutely fantastic. And sometimes it's hard to come up with all of these backstories if you're new to the game and you're new to storytelling and just trying to figure out all the mechanics. But if you really want to have a good character, you're going to have to sit down with some people and just talk about it. And I think a lot of us in this community are so willing to speak with each other about character creation and storytelling.
Mm-hmm. So let's jump down to world building. I don't know how much we're going to be able to dive into world building,
Sure.
But what is your experience with world building your world? I'm not even going to try to say that name.
So the world that I created, it's called Lyciria, and it didn't really, the world of Lyciria didn't really form into what it is now, because when I started doing this campaign with our friends, we really just started out with the Lost Mines of Phandelver, because two of the party members were new to the game. They had never played, they had never created a story or a character or any such. And so it's like, okay, well, we'll start off easy. We'll figure out how this goes. But as I sat down in session 0 with them and began to hear what they were wanting to create, one of the one of the players, Ted, he was like, "I want to be an Aarakocra." Okay, cool. And then the other players said, "Okay, I'm going to be a Minotaur, and I want to be a Changeling, and I want to be a Drow." And I'm like, man, these are like all exotic people that you want to be from many different facets of like the Dungeons and Dragons realm. Like Minotaurs are going to be from Ravnica, and Changelings from Eberron, and Aarakocra from the elemental plane of air, and the Drow from the Underdark. And it's like, okay, well, this will be interesting to try to figure out where you all like come together, and so I guess we'll just kind of start off easy and figure it out. But really, it was like as we started progressing, I was asking really a lot of questions of the module itself, like where did this NPC come from? Like, why were they there? It's not in the module itself, but I just kept asking myself questions of where did they come from? Like, what's going on in the rest of the world? Or why did this part of, like, why did the creation of Fandelver, this forge, like, get lost in the first place? What happened here?
Mm-hmm.
And then when I started doing a bunch of research too on wikis, and really I'd like fell down into what it was definitely a rabbit hole. I fell into a rabbit hole of lore, and after question after question after question of trying to figure out what the lore was, it just started morphing into something that was more than I had anticipated. So all of these questions I began to slowly answer for this world and this module. And it was very interesting to run through the Lost Mines of Fandelver because we were meeting every week, and the module was, I don't know, I think it's 27 pages or something, but it's short. It's meant to be a short module, just to get people, it's part of the starter kit. So just to get people into it. And I ended up stretching out that module for the better part of a year and expanding on the pieces that were given in that module, just because I simply asked a bunch of questions of what was going on within the module.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as players and as dungeon masters or game masters, I think asking questions is going to be the best part of creating a character, creating a world, and diving in deeper and deeper into the lore that you've created. I mean, we all want to have a dynamic world as we're world building. So the dynamics come from answering questions. If we're not answering questions, then there's no opportunity to make the world dynamic. So simply just asking yourself, well, your characters are in this one portion of the world. Well, what's going on the next territory over? What's going on with that little section there? Even that question can start you on the path of expanding the current setting, the current territory into a larger and larger world, because you simply asked yourself, what's going on there?
Yeah, some of my favorite games started as modules or as campaign settings, and then because of the players and the DM allowing it, it became much, much more. And it was little things like making NPCs more alive, making them more than just a paragraph in the book, or falling in love with the wrong person, or adopting a child that you see is in danger and they don't have a home. So like little things like that, for me, make a story.
Oh yeah.
Where the book isn't going to tell you, oh, you have to adopt, you have to take this child in, you need to do this. It's not going to tell you that. It's just going to say, here's a random NPC. You might need to do a particular quest that involves them. Once that quest is done, the book doesn't care about that person anymore.
Right.
The only exception I've seen with that, I think, a little bit was Dragon Heist. Because Dragon Heist, the way that it handled it, it was interesting. Because have you played Dragon Heist?
I haven't played it, but I mean, the current party has some. They've been thrown some hooks that could lead them to different aspects of Dragon Heist. So I've read up on quite a bit of it.
Okay, so slight spoilers, but I'm gonna try not to spoil as much as I can. The ultimate goal of Dragon Heist is to go find the millions of dragons, or AKA gold, under the city. So that's the goal. So you meet throughout this process, you meet a shit ton of NPCs from the different groups like the Emerald Enclave and the Zentarum, to the guards, to your neighbors at the Skullkeep Cavern.
Even a bunch of nobles and...
Yeah, a bunch of nobles who... One of our players ended up dating one of them, and then I ended up dating the big bad end boss. Or one of the big bad bosses, not the actual end boss. But you meet a ton of NPCs in this game. And that actually came in key for us later in the game, because this wasn't, I don't think, part of the story, but you got to ask for help for all the people you have befriended. We got to call in favors. We got to say, hey, we're taking on the BBE. We need your help. What can you do? And we literally had dozens and dozens and dozens of people there.
Oh, man.
Including the Black Staff themselves, who was taking down one thing, which, again, I'm trying not to spoil. They weren't ultimately helping with something. And then we had assassins from...
The Zents?
No, from JB Nevercott, or... This was the person my character was dating. Why can't I not remember his name?
From Juralaxle?
Juralaxle, thank you, yes. So we had assassins donated to us from Juralaxle, and we had the Emerald Enclave like saying, nope, sorry, we're not going to help you because we want to be neutral. And we're like, okay, cool. And then we had guards lent to us to make sure nobody escaped, because we made a deal with the two really crappy guards, detectives, and we won. And we're like, you owe us 400 gold, so either pay us 400 gold or give us a bunch of guards.
Oh, man.
So, like, we got all this help, and that totally was a huge boon for us. But then what was funny, and this one was definitely part of the story, once we succeeded at our task, all these people that we had spoken to came out of the wet works and are like, oh, we hear you have a lot of money now.
Yeah,
can you help us?
Yeah.
And we got to pick and choose, each of us. Some of us chose not to help anybody, and some of us chose to help particular people. But we got to choose that and help choose who we wanted to assist with our, like, I think we each got 10,000 gold or something like that, which is a lot. And we're just...
Yeah, it's a lot of money at the end of that module.
I think I helped the Zentarum, but I helped like the small group of the Zentarum that were like being framed and weren't actually part of the whole Zentarum. And I was like, yeah, I'll help you. They're like, well, we need 5,000 gold. I'm like, that's fine.
Oh.
Here's how you got to pay me back.
Wow.
And they ran my drug business for me when I went on my trip overseas for the next 5 years.
Yeah, I think, like, especially with that module, I mean, it's so open-ended. There's just like, okay, at the end of this, here's your money, and then like we're not going to give you any details. But with you and your experience getting a bunch of NPCs involved in there, I mean, a good way to continue that story, if you're thinking about how to dynamically change the world, is if you were to call on a group or an individual and say, hey, we really need your help. We think that you're going to be a benefit to what we're about to experience here. And they say, no, sorry, I'm not available. I'm doing this other thing right now. Maybe later, though.
Yeah. I'm hoping we continue the story one day, because it jumps right into Mad Mage.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And I really, really want to continue the story because I really, really miss Roya. But I don't know if it's going to happen just because of distance. We used to play with me, my husband, Greg, and Ashley, who we're the whole Clearlight team, and then they had roommates who moved out. But because they used to live with them, it was super easy to get them to play. But now they moved like an hour away.
Oh, man.
So I don't foresee us playing anymore, which sucks.
Yeah. Well, it'd be interesting to do that.
Yeah, it would be. I would love to see like the 5 years later, like what happens.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of a cool thing too, is to really think about at the end of all of these modules that, I mean, the Wizards of the Coast has created all of this stuff, but really at the end of the day, they have listed in their books is, these are all just guidelines. It's up to you as players and game master to fill in the blanks and do with the rules as you see fit. So the same goes with character building and world building. If you don't like something, then pull it from somewhere else. If you don't like how the Feywild looks in the Wizards of the Coast version, then pull it from Fairy Tale Feywild, And you're not locked in when you're world building, you're not locked into like the Faerun Dungeons and Dragons or, the Greyhawk setting, lore and everything. If you're able to steal from multiple different sources and twist it into something that you feel like is uniquely yours, then that's going to make your players feel like they're playing in a world that you have created for them.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do with my current Monday game. It's all homebrew, and we're using like 4 or 5 different books to like meld different things that I like from different places.
Mm-hmm.
So the kingdom building is from Baldrin's Guide to Kingdom Building.
Okay.
The herbalism is from the Wilderness Survival Guide. The crafting is from Hammond's Harvesting Handbook. And then from like those 3 places, I take a lot of stuff, but then I add little things from, like I add downtime from like from Xanathar's Guide, and I add contacts from Shadowrun.
Oh, yeah.
Which is one of my favorite parts of Shadowrun. So I just take all these little things and I'm like, here's how we're going to play this.
Yep.
And it's a very much top-down view most of the time. And it's a lot faster than like a normal day-to-day D&D game would be.
Mm-hmm.
We have quests that could take a couple of days, but then we'll do like a month of downtime.
Okay.
Where we just kind of skip ahead a little bit.
And during those downtime times, then it's kind of a perfect opportunity for you to go in there and then change some of the goings-ons of the world around to make it feel like more dynamic, like things are going on outside of just this little bubble of the party.
Yeah, exactly. And what's fun is the Baldur's Kingdom Guide to Kingdom Building. I keep saying that name wrong. I'm going to put it in the description. So pretend I said it right every time. But in that book, they actually like it's supposed to be like a year, but I'm making it a quarter. So every quarter, the party gets to do something to their town. So every quarter, every other town in that country or that world also gets to do something.
Yeah.
And right now, like that's actually a rule in the book. And right now, they aren't big enough to be a blimp on the radar for these other towns. So it's not really a huge deal.
Mm-hmm.
But the further we get along, depending on what they do, they might piss off one of the neighboring towns.
Yeah.
And one of them is a bunch of dragons. So I don't know if they want to do that.
Oh no. Or they end up looking over at the next town over and they're like, wait a minute, what's going on over there? That could be a call for an investigation of some sort.
Yeah, that could be fun. It was actually really fun because I did a live stream for the city building for the 2 closest towns to where the players are. And the way I was doing it was I was building each building and then just kind of calculating how long it would take approximately. And I was like, the way we planned out what the cities were was I gave the players questions and I said, there's a town to the north of you. What's the name of the town? And then the next player, what kind of species and races live there? And the next player, what's their imports? Next player, what's their exports? Like, what kind of government do they run? And with that knowledge, I had to use this timeline of them building their city to figure out what happened. So actually, I can give you an example. Let me open it up really quick.
Yeah, that's a great use of just asking more of these. It seems like simple questions, but the simple questions lead to just more questions and then in-depth research into what those answers could be. So I think that that's great to be using the format of ask a question, find an answer, and you're going to be able to put that anywhere within your world.
So, since I know at least one of my players listen, this is a spoiler for Terracina. Be aware. But so Terracina is a city to the north that is a port city. They're right on the waterway, so they should have decent access to the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
They are a plutocracy, so whoever has the most money rules.
Mm-hmm.
They import mithril ore and they export weapons.
Hmm.
And the three most common races are Aarakocra, Tabaxis, and Dwarves. And I'm like, how the fuck am I going to get that to work?
Yeah.
So you start, when you're building, you start with what kind of houses do they have. So I went with Aarakocras first.
Okay.
And I decided that this is a cliffside and that they built rookeries on the cliffside as Aarakocras, just shy of the water.
Okay.
So they're just doing their thing. And I rolled, because in that it says give them a flaw and give them a characteristic. I won't say what their characteristic is because that is a definite spoiler, but their flaw was they like to collect shiny things, like excessively, obsessively collect shiny things, which fits really well with plutocracy.
Yep.
So I'm like, cool, they like to collect shiny things. This is how they got rich and why. It's technically not the richest person. It's the person with the most shinies is the person who is ruling. So I'm just kind of building and slowly just building room by room by room, just kind of figuring it out. And then about 3 years in, I found a way to I added a smithy. And I'm like, okay, cool. We have a smithy now. That's great. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe this is when the dwarves came in.
Yeah.
The dwarves start joining, and they were like, you guys keep stealing our shiny shit. What if we give you food instead? Then you won't steal our shiny things.
Yeah.
Is this a deal? So then they made the bakery to provide bread for the Aarakocra, because birds love bread. Then they built a brewery for the dwarves and a tavern for them.
Okay.
But then they built like a dock and a fishery and a fish market and things like that to make sure that they're bringing fish in for the Aarakocra so they can maintain this alliance.
Okay.
So then about year 5, a carnival comes to town run by a family of Tabaxi. And you would first, are like, Tabaxis are cats, Aarakocras are birds, oil and water, but both like shiny things. So they bond over this mutual like of shiny things. And this is when we start getting the bazaar and the fairgrounds and the carnival and just like the fun, whimsical, extra things.
Yeah.
And they start to like build together. And now they're in about year 7, year 8 of existence, give or take. And they all start to realize that their neighbors who have dragons might notice that they have all these shiny things, but they also have shinies.
Yeah.
So what if they just start building their weapons up and making more protection for themselves so that they can go and potentially take all the shinies from the dragons?
Yeah, and that's their export business, to keep it a little bit more hidden from the town adjacent to them. Yeah.
So I just slowly built this up while like picking and choosing buildings, and I'm like, oh my god, this is perfect. What if this? Oh, I like that. And then like I did the same thing with the other city, which has the dragons, and I fucking love that story too. But like the dragon is completely oblivious that it's a theocracy and that he's being worshipped. Completely fucking oblivious.
Oh man, that's actually a pretty great story, I would have to say, to have a dragon oblivious to being worshipped.
He just wants to read. He keeps getting books and he's like, awesome.
He's a bookworm.
Yep. He's just like, I'm just going to read. It's fine. Oh, you built a building around me. Cool. Shelter. That's smart. You guys are smart.
Just keep me with the shinies and we're all good. Just give me some books.
He just wants the books, yeah. And then I made it so that the people who worship him basically take everything he says as law and as scripture. So he makes a comment about, oh, I was reading about how defenses was reading about defenses and military strategies, and then they just go full ham on military and just bump that up as much as possible until the next time he's like, I was reading about commerce one day, and then they start bumping up commerce.
Oh, that's funny.
So that one's way less balanced than the city should have been. So you see the city like, well, if you look at the way that it's built, it just goes military from like 4 points to 10 points, and then commerce from 4 points to 10 points.
Yeah. I imagine that city probably has a lot of half-done projects and buildings as well, because like the dragon's constantly reading and then shifting their ideas.
I kind of put it where he just spends like a couple of years hyper-focused on the same subject until he runs out of books. Just for lack of need, but that is clever. Nice. Where they're just like that. There could be half-finished projects where they're like, well, we kind of have a wall. We have like half of a wall.
Yeah.
It's half protecting us.
Yeah. But the dragon's just like, oh, I was reading about this, and then they're super like, well, we worship this person, so obviously we obviously don't need to focus on our military aspect anymore. Now it's time to focus on our commerce aspect. So drop everything and do this.
It's like, you guys heard him? We need more money. Yeah. Money's important. Let's go.
Yeah.
So right now they're on like what year am I on? 58 divided by 4, whatever the hell that is. But they're on that year, and technically I'm not even, so that's almost 15 years that this town has been growing, which is twice as long as the other town almost. And I'm not done yet technically with that town. Like I wanted to bump it up a little bit more so that they were pretty equal across the board, where the other town doesn't necessarily have an equal footing on everything because they like focus on certain things and not other things.
Gotcha.
Because the way that the book works is instead of attributes, you have industry scores, but they're the same concept. So you start at 1 and you work up your way to 20 plus. And you get, if you have a 19, you have +4. If you have a 1, you have -4 on your D20 roll if you need to roll.
Okay.
So you want to try to keep everything balanced, but you don't have to. At least at first you should, but you don't have to.
Going back to the flaws in characters, if you can have flaws in your world building and your townships that you're running too. I mean, not one town isn't going to be great at everything, and one territory isn't great at everything. So by all means, put flaws into your world building aspect too.
Exactly, and both of those cities are perfect examples of flawed cities.
Yeah.
And the city that the players are creating is probably going to be flawed too.
What? A city created by players is flawed? Is that what you're saying?
It should be. Well, at least with the person that's running it, it will be. If I have any say about it.
That's cool. I don't think I've heard of that style or system of creating townships. So that's really interesting.
It came from, well, so the first time I heard about it was Pathfinder Ultimate Campaign.
Okay.
Which is for Pathfinder 1E, and it's a side module that's supposed to be used for adventurers. So basically, adventurers have so much money, here's something else you can put it into. You can make your own town. That was the concept. And I absolutely adore the concept because, like I said earlier, my biggest thing is like I like building connections and I like building familiar, and whether it's family specifically or friends or just some sort of connection, I like that aspect of it.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm okay with having a player that's settling down versus adventuring for the next 20 plus years.
Yeah.
So I loved the concept of that, but I wanted it to be more, what would happen if like a normal everyday NPC tried to do this without all the money, or an adventurer, but without all the money? Like, how would they build a town? They're not just going to be like, here's 1,000 gold, build me a tavern. Like, no. Like, you have to get something to build it. You can't just pay somebody to do it.
Right.
And I like that point of view. And we did try playing Ultimate Campaign before, and I was a player, and I absolutely loved the game. But the DM ended up just, like, disappearing one day. But it was harder to make it work, because with the one thing I don't like about Ultimate Campaign with the kingdom aspect was there are like 7 or 8 roles to run the campaign, or to run the kingdom. And if any of those spots are empty, then you are losing points in things. Like major losing points, and it's so easy to lose that game to just like go into anarchy.
Interesting. So yeah, it's more of like that. So it is like a kingdom building. It's not campaign. It's not adventuring whatsoever.
So the focus was kingdom building, but there is adventures to get the items they need to
Gotcha.
build the
Okay.
kingdom.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to find a happy medium to give me the satisfaction of the kingdom building part, but not just have that overview majesty style look.
Yeah.
So the players like right now are on a trip, and they had a quest that they need to do to go convince a fire method to join the ranks to build a smithy to keep the fire ever going. And if they can do that, then they'll have a smithy and after the end of this quarter. But they also took some jobs off the job board to go kill some oozes and get some brown ooze, ichor, and some carrion crawlers. So if they complete those tasks for these NPCs, they'll also get some money out of it.
Yeah.
So there's like multiple things that they can do. I'm trying to like, for lack of a better explanation, Ultimate Campaign mixed with Majesty, mixed with RimWorld, mixed with Monster Hunter.
Okay.
Mixed with D&D.
I mean, it all sounds like, the campaign certainly sounds like it's a mashup of so many different things, and your players probably absolutely love the adventuring and role playing and the adventuring portion of it, and then you sound like you're really into that world building aspect of it that they are helping with their township.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think tomorrow will be our 4th session. So it's still a newer game. So some of the kinks are still being worked out a little bit.
Nice.
I think it's going good so far. So that's good. And hopefully it continues to go good. And it works the way that I've always imagined it.
Well, I hope so too. That's a very, very cool concept. And it's actually one that I would very much be interested into seeing, like, your top-down view of how those inner workings of, because all of those mechanics have to be working together within all of those little pieces that you've put together, and still have the opportunities for the characters to do something during their sessions and then affect the world around them.
Yeah. I'll have to show you my Excel sheet.
Well, I do have to say I love Excel sheets. So
Excel sheets are the best.
yeah, if you get down to the nitty gritty of Excel, and you can really kind of morph it into what you would really like it to be doing. So and again, I'm a little bit more into the math side of a lot of stuff, and so using Excel and all of the mechanics within D&D is just kind of one way of attempting to tell a story, but really it's up to ourselves as players and dungeon masters to come up with the bigger part of the story and the collaborative story that we're wanting to tell for each other.
Yeah, for sure. So, on that note, tell us where everybody can find you.
Sure. So if you are looking for me specifically, you can pretty much find me at any handle as ttiger077 all over the internet. I mean, I use the same username for pretty much everything. So if you're looking for me, Tony, that's where you'll find me on Discord or on Steam or anything else. I do a podcast of character building we called Make It Playable, and where we take personalities from film and comics and anime and cartoons and whatnot, and we try to create them into Dungeons and Dragons characters. And you can find that on any sort of podcasting platform under Make It Playable. We are finishing up our Disney and Dragons segment. I think Anna was just released. So by the time that this comes out in February, we'll probably be done, if not nearly done, with Elsa and Moana.
Oh, this is coming out on the 8th, which is in a week.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll probably have Elsa out by then. If you're interested in figuring out how to play Princess Elsa in Dungeons and Dragons, you can give it a listen. We also are on Twitch. I do a stream on Mondays called Critically Random, where I just randomly generate a character and create a backstory and then a little bit of the mechanics going into the character. So that's more of creative storytelling mixed with Dungeons and Dragons characters. So you can find us on Twitch at Playable. If you would like to contact us on Twitter, we are also at Playable. And we are on a little bit of a hiatus with our campaigns at the moment. We do have ongoing Dungeons and Dragons and a Star Wars campaign that we live stream on Twitch, but we're taking several weeks off so that we can get some family stuff figured out and whatnot. But we'll be coming back to that in probably towards the end of March. So you can always look us up if you're interested in the world of Lyceria and kind of this homebrewish system that I've come up with. Or if you're very interested in Star Wars, you can join us for our Star Wars campaign.
Yeah, well, thank you again for joining. I appreciate it. And now you get to see the behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And everybody else, thank you so much for listening. And please check out all the descriptions down below where we will put all the links that were just mentioned in the detailed boxy thingamabob. You can find
Doobly-doo.
the doobly-doo. You can find me on Twitter at beholder2no1, where I am way too active. And if you want to help support this show, you can find our Patreon, which is in our link tree that's also in our Twitter bio. Also, I'm pretty sure by this point my website will be updated, so please go check out a really cool website that my husband made. I'm pretty sure he's also accepting people to get hired, so you should all hire him to make you fancy websites too. But yeah, check us out on Thursdays for our Beholder to One Shot or Behold Clearlight episodes. And hopefully, if you do listen to those, you are highly enjoying them because I enjoy playing them. And if you haven't, go listen to episode 12 because I worked really, 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 really hard on editing that one. Like, really hard.
She did.
So I need you all to...
She really did.
I need you to go listen to it and validate my experiences. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye!